everyone. Welcome to the 387th episode of the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and your co-host,
Kevin Toffel.
And we have a lot to talk about this week. We're going to be talking about the FTC suing some companies for tracking people. We're going to be talking about other privacy groups asking the FTC to maybe not sue, but definitely investigate some privacy policies and tracking in cars. We've got a company that, man, this is both cool and creepy, putting sensors on consumer packaged goods to track usage. We've got some details and news from IFA about the Home Connectivity Alliance, EVE, and we've got a smart feature from Tado, the European smart thermostat company. ADT is getting into personal security, and we've got another acquisition from Telit in the industrial, it's the IoT connectivity space, actually. We're going to hear from our sponsor, Infineon, talking about TinyML, and we're going to hear from our guest, Winston Mock, who is the CEO of a connected air filter company called Whoosh. And he's here to talk about, man, is it still a good idea to do a Kickstarter for a connected device in 2022? All of this and more await you. But first, a message from another one of our sponsors. This week's sponsor is Silicon Labs. Works With by Silicon Labs has emerged as the go-to developer conference for building the skills needed to create an impactful connected device. On September 13th through 15th, Silicon Labs is bringing together the most influential technology brands, ecosystem partners, and developers for 3 days of technical training, keynotes, and expert panels, including one on the Matter protocol led by moi. So this is online, it is free, so go to workswith.scilabs.com to register and learn more. Okay, Kevin. Let's talk about the FTC.
Put the Steam Deck down. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Kevin got a new toy, y'all. Kevin, you want to tell everybody about it? It is pretty cool.
I got my Steam Deck from Valve. It's a portable PC gaming handheld that I had to wait since November for. Yeah, November. I'm so excited.
Yeah, man, we're lucky he's doing the show because we got to make this fast. We've only got until his first game downloads.
It's 40 gig, don't worry. Plenty of time.
We've got time. And all right, so let's talk about the FTC, something a little less fun. Well, actually, this is kind of good. So we talked about a couple weeks ago, the FTC basically warning companies that are in the data brokerage business that location tracking is not anonymous. And they wanted to basically tell those companies that might be tracking location that they cannot say that this data is anonymized. And I was like, yeah, go FTC, because it's true. For most people, if you track their location, because people tend to go home at night or they tend to go to work every day, it's very easy to de-anonymize location data.
You have to put some effort into it with some other data, yes.
You could just follow my location data. I mean, you'd see that, yes, you would have to look up my address, but you'd be like, wow, somebody who lives at this address is going to these places, right? That's
right. And once you have that tie together of the two pieces of data, who that person is and that location beacon, then you can figure out where that particular individual is all the time, in a sense.
Yeah. You can say that you're de-anonymizing it, but you're really not. Anyway, so the FTC gave that warning a couple weeks back. It came to a head in the wakes of the Dobbs decision, the Supreme Court's decision on Dobbs, that basically took away your perceived constitutional right to privacy, which meant that abortions, which were kind of granted in Roe v. Wade as being a private matter, that's what kind of enabled that. So basically, they were like, you know what? It's not private. And so states can now say abortions are illegal, and many states have done so. So this all came to a head because suddenly we're like, oh my God, I'm walking around with a cell phone that could actually tell police or attorney general in a state that I have had an abortion, for example, by going to an abortion clinic.
Or that you're leaving the state because your state doesn't grant them, so...
Yeah. All of that became an issue. So the FTC has this week filed a lawsuit against a data broker called Kochava. This is a data broker is a company that buys this location data. They might buy it from cell phone providers. They might buy it from Google. They might buy it from an app that runs on your phone that is also tracking your location. There's lots of places they can get this. So Kochava basically is the first in probably a number of lawsuits. This is a test case for the FTC to basically say, you know what? We cannot sell sensitive geolocation information, period. Kuchava is based in Idaho, and they buy lots of data from many mobile device companies. And users typically are not aware that there's this entire industry behind the scenes buying their data and selling it.
Mm-hmm. And to be honest, in this particular data broker's case, they know that it's not as anonymous as one might think, because in their marketing materials, they've touted identifying households as one of the possible uses of its data.
Yeah.
So they know.
And the FTC pointed out that there are several sensitive areas that can be tracked here. Reproductive health clinics is one. Places of worship. So knowing if someone is Jewish or Muslim or Christian. Homeless and domestic violence shelters. This is a big one that I know that I've talked to domestic violence groups about. A stalker could get access to location about the people coming into the shelters. Addiction recovery centers. So knowing someone's in rehab, that's kind of an issue. You could also, is someone going to dialysis? There's lots of places that you might not want to broadcast to basically anyone or an unknown. It could be law enforcement. Your employer could buy this data if they wanted to. Anyway, so the FTC has done this as a lawsuit. This is going to take time. We're probably going to see an appeals, but it's a start, and it signals that the FTC is very serious about this. So yay. Now
what some people want the FTC to look into, which, boy, I have mixed emotions on this. I really do.
We'll talk about that, because Fight for the Future, which is a privacy organization, is basically asking the Federal Trade Commission to say, hey, you know what? You're interested in data regulation and location information. Why don't you begin a rulemaking that preemptively limits Amazon, Google, Apple, and Meta from getting into the automotive market and gathering all of that data from cars?
So here's my two opposing points of view in my own mind. One, I have a Tesla car, and I did talk about recently about some of the privacy aspects of it and the cameras and so on and so forth. And I had said it's a balance of privacy versus convenience, and I really appreciate all the features that I get when I give up the data, right? And I kind of feel the same way about any of these companies if they get into the automotive market. I feel better about certain companies getting into it than others. It doesn't matter. I'm not going to name names. It's just, I definitely feel better about that. But to exclude them all, it definitely opens up opportunities for smaller companies. And I appreciate that. And if I can get similar or the same services, that's good. But now I've got to evaluate how many more new companies and their privacy practices and so on, right? At least it's kind of like the devil I know with these 4 companies. So I just don't know how I feel about this yet.
So having location data available is important for services. So things like Waze, things like DoorDash,
just traffic, just traffic. Yeah. I couldn't get that if I turned off the location data or my privacy settings in the Tesla. It's one of the things I lost. So I couldn't get rerouted. I turned it back on.
Yeah. So one of the things that I think is worth thinking about is maybe we just put location data overall as sensitive. Like actual location data is so sensitive that you can't sell it to a third party, period. That's going to be very bad for lots of businesses, because there's both like demographically interesting information. So I want to target Christians in this area, but there's also things like being able to say, hey, Best Buy showed me an online ad through Google, and then later that day I was at Best Buy. That's the kind of follow through that advertisers really want to see, right?
Right.
But I think that all location data, because it cannot be anonymized and because it can be so sensitive, should not be sold, period, to third-party brokers. Done.
It goes back to and this will be really bad, I think, for Google the most. It gives back to the whole advertising model, which is the internet is very advertising driven. But I wonder if there's an opportunity for somebody like the EFF to sponsor I'll call it a project where we have data proxies that my location data and all my privacy stuff goes through this proxy. And if it needs, like if I'm doing a Google search or I'm checking traffic in my car, it receives that request and routes it to, say, Google or Waze or whomever. And then Google sends it back to the proxy and I get it back. And then the next time I hit that proxy, I have a totally new ID and everything else. And it just kind of puts a wall in between them getting they're getting the data, but they can't tie it to me at that point. Kind of like a VPN works, right? But a VPN on steroids, I guess.
Yeah. But then how would they couldn't demographically tie it back to you. It sounds kind of like Google Flock.
Mm-hmm. But I don't want Google to be that intermediary.
Right.
Right. And I don't care if they don't have the demographic information. Honestly, I want my service.
Right. And maybe you end up paying for that service so they can, I would pay for real-time traffic information. That's actually hugely valuable.
Sure. Would you pay that proxy company or entity? I'll call it like a consortium or whatever, like a nonprofit essentially. Would you pay them to be your privacy VPN for all of your devices so that you still get your data back for your services, but then the service providers are not getting data tied specifically to you? I would pay.
Yes.
I'm firing up a Raspberry Pi right now. I'm going to make a data proxy. I'm going to make millions. No.
Maybe. All right. So that's one way to handle this. I like it because there are two issues. There's the data brokerage issue, right? So that's anybody buying this data. So that's civil. There's also the government having access to real-time location data. And governments actually have an interest in this because, police can use it for warrants, like to try to figure out if someone was near someplace at the time of a crime. So we also need to have rules in place about how law enforcement can access and use this data that's, I guess, congruent with our Fourth Amendment rights. And we're seeing the courts decide this a little bit. So it's not legal for police just to stick a GPS thing on your vehicle and use that to track you to places. But they can currently buy that data from a company and get it.
Yeah, they don't need to install the hardware. The hardware's already there. They just need the data.
We've got to figure out rules for companies who are trying to get this data, who they can, so for third-party data brokers. And then we also have to figure out how law enforcement should be able to access this data in a way that doesn't violate our right to unreasonable search and seizure. Okay, so that's a lot. And I don't know if we're going to be able to do that or not, really. So let's talk about, this is also creepy.
Yes and no.
I think this is creepy. This is a company in your neck of the woods. So it's in Pittsburgh. It's called AdRich. Yeah, tell us about it.
They are a startup. I believe they're about 4 years old. They have created what they call smart labels, which I at first, when I saw the headline of this story in the Pittsburgh Gazette, thought, it's like nutrition labels for privacy and whatnot. But no, these are very thin film labels that have Bluetooth capability and sensors that go behind the label of a product that you buy. Say, for example, you're buying laundry detergent. There'd be a big label on the front of that detergent and the back from the maker of the detergent. But behind the label will be one of these smart labels. And the whole approach here for AdRich is it gives the brand, the manufacturer, information about real-time usage of the product, how much product was used, when is the product used, when is the product about to run out. This is where I think it got creepy when I pointed out to Stacy that they have gathered enough data. Obviously, they've got smart labels on certain peanut butter brands that say the average consumer tends to run out of peanut butter between 10 and 11:30 p.m. Average millennial finishes a jar of peanut butter in 4 days, while a Gen X member finishes it one in 10 days. That gets a little creepy, but again, that's the kind of data that is valuable to advertisers, and can, when they see that you're about to run out, they can send you a survey or a coupon to retain you as a customer. So it's interesting, but yes, it is sort of creepy, yes.
Yes. And this spun out of Carnegie Mellon back in 2016. So it's 6 years old, but that's okay.
Gotcha.
They did raise funding, seed funding in 2019, including from Sony. And yes. I have so many feelings about this. One, I've seen smart labels on devices that interact with the internet forever. All the way back in 2008, I think I was looking at I think they were NFC tags.
Mm-hmm, that wouldn't surprise me.
Yeah, NFC tags. There were some active and passive RFID tags where you could get information from stuff. Later on, there were Amazon Dash buttons. Amazon killed the Dash buttons, but they still have their replenishment program.
These guys have hooked up with AWS, or Amazon rather, for the replenishment service in certain product lines.
Yeah. So the idea here, again, I give my location data in exchange for real-time traffic information. Here it's, I no longer have to think about reordering toilet paper, but people will know when I've used toilet paper.
But I will say this. Currently, the customers have to opt into this to allow the behaviors monitored by the smart label and download an app, which makes total sense because these are Bluetooth tags. They're going to communicate with some ad-rich app on your phone and send that data up. So if you don't have the app, it's not going to do anything.
True. Yes. So at least it's opt-in. Yay.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Speaking of innovation, it is IFA. I don't know what IFA stands for, but it's a huge show.
Stands for IFA.
It stands for IFA. It's a huge show it's kind of like CES, but there's a little, I was going to say there's more appliance kind of oriented news, but CES has become very appliance oriented too. So I'm kind of like, we'll call it a German CES.
Yeah, we saw Martin Yan a couple years back.
Yeah. So
in the appliances. Yeah.
Okay. So IFA's happening. Its press days are today and tomorrow. Then the show happens over Labor Day weekend. It's always a little iffy for us here in the U.S.
It's always a little IFA.
Anyway, terrible. So next week, we'll probably talk about more of the news out of IFA, but so far there's a little bit. The Home Connectivity Alliance, they launched at CES this last year. We actually had the head of the Home Connectivity Alliance on the podcast in January. And this is a group of appliance companies trying to create a cloud-to-cloud data model. So your washing machines from different vendors might talk to dryers from different vendors, or fridges could talk to your SmartThings app or whatever. So Samsung was one of the first appliance companies behind this. At the time, I was like, hey, this is positive. I like where this is going because nobody wants to buy, appliances from every single same vendor, right? Well, at the time, I was like, well, but there's not enough. Like some of the original members were GE Appliances, Samsung, Trane, which makes HVAC equipment, American Standard Heating and Air Conditioning. I don't know how to say this. Higher, which is GE Appliances. And Electrolux. So there were some good companies, but I was like, where's LG? Well, LG has joined. LG has now joined the HDA, as has Resideo, it's the Honeywell brand. So this is going to tie. So think about things like tying your HVAC energy use maybe to your dryer. So maybe now you can put your dryer in with demand response, which you may hate or may love, or your oven, or maybe, well, I don't know. I mean, some of these things, I'm like, the use cases are probably more around energy. I can't see a reason why I would want my dryer to talk to my refrigerator, but maybe somebody else can. I don't know.
No, to me, it would be energy. And in fact, I would not want my clothes sitting in the dryer waiting for a cheaper time to go. But I would put my washer on at that time because then the dryer would, go at a lower rate.
Yeah, later. The other thing that they announced at IFA, the Resideo and LG was actually last week, but at IFA, they said that they showed off a demo of the first cloud-to-cloud connectivity demonstration. So basically, they showed how multiple brands of apps can control different HVAC systems and TVs. So you could use like the Samsung SmartThings app to control your Trane thermostat, which actually...
It's like Matter for appliances.
Yes, except HCA is cloud to cloud. It is not local. Matter is local. But yes, it's important to note that if your internet goes down, so does your ability to control these appliances. So this is going to sound so silly, but it is kind of nice because if you imagine your LG dryer can ping you when it's dry in your Samsung SmartThings app, which means because you can tie your Samsung SmartThings app to your Madam A or your Google device, maybe Madam A could announce when that's done drying, which a lot of y'all seem to really want. So, I mean, you'd have to buy a new washer or dryer that had the Wi-Fi connectivity. But if you've got it, great. And just yesterday, y'all, I actually turned on my oven from my phone. I adjusted the temperature in my oven because I was slow cooking something.
Oh, your regular oven, not your June.
Yeah, my regular oven, my GE oven that does have Wi-Fi and it is connected. And I was like, I'm sitting here. Actually, I had a migraine. So I was laying in my bed, and I'm like, I think I put it on 300. Let me check. So I put it on 300 for slow cooking some beans. I was like, let me do it for 325. And I changed it without getting up.
Yeah.
It felt magical. Was it worth buying a connected oven for that? No. But because I had one, it was kind of nice. All right. Also at IFA, Eve, they're launching a bunch of new stuff.
Well, they're making a big deal, which this is not new, but it's worth to mention again that with Matter devices, they will be moving beyond Apple HomeKit support, which we've mentioned before. But again, if you're an Android user or you have a smart home built around something else other than HomeKit, you'll be able to use Eve products. And I've used many of them and I really like them. So this is great for you guys. And there's first time I've seen this, a time frame. The Eve app for Android will be here in late 2022, which is not that far away because it's like September.
Yeah, because Matter, remember, is going to be coming out in fall.
Yep.
What that means, probably not,
our fall, Northern Hemisphere fall.
I was like, there we go. All right. So they're also announcing new motorization options for Eve motion blinds. So they're going to support Venetian blinds, which are those thick wood blinds, and metal aluminum blinds, the kind that
the vines at the Venetian in Vegas. Yeah.
Right. And they're going to support the blinds from a company called Coulisse. They're also going to create a shutter switch, which converts an existing in-wall roller shutter switch into an automated shading option that you can schedule. So that's pretty cool.
Mm-hmm. That's Europe only.
That's only in Europe. They're adding the third generation of Eve Light Switch will add thread support, and it will work in rooms with three-way switches. Yay!
And since it always has power, it will be they say it connects as a router node. I was thinking border router, but
yeah, I don't know if it's a border
maybe
router.
not. All right, well, it's a router node. You can never have too many of those.
Thread has some nomenclature issues. Good Lord.
Two different types of routers on the same network. Yeah.
I think a router node is it's not a border router. It's a powered node that can store information about routing from the non-powered nodes. I think it's that intermediate step. Anyway.
Okay.
There's also going to be a white edition of the Eve Outdoor Cam, if you care.
I tested the black edition.
And it has the HomeKit secure video.
It does. And it's got a really nice camera, very wide view and very crisp.
There you go. The Eve Light Switch that we talked about is going to be available in October for $49.95. And the outdoor camera will be available in December. The white outdoor camera will be available in December for $249.95.
That may sound expensive, but it's also motion sensitive and has a floodlight that you can turn on. So just
and that's in line with the Nest Cam. I have a Nest Cam that costs that much. So, all right. In other appliance-y kind of news, Tado, which is a European smart home company, they really only do heating and HVAC stuff. They used to do other stuff and they got out of that business. But they now have a subscription product. So for £4 or €4 a month or €30 or pounds a year, it will shift your home energy consumption from your HVAC to take advantage of cheaper electricity. So basically, if it is winter and it's like, oh my gosh, it'll be so much cheaper to heat your home during the day using like solar power, for example, it will preheat your home so at night you're not using as much heat, if that makes sense. So it's basic.
It'll overheat essentially while it's cheaper. Yes.
I mean, if you're home all day, you're probably not going to love this feature, but if you're like get home late at night, it's a much better feature.
If you're home all day, you probably don't have time of use or off-peak use electricity or power anyway, unless you have solar and batteries and whatnot. But yes.
So we've talked about this sort of option. I know that my hot water heater can do this. We talked to a company a couple months ago called Plentify that does this. I expect to see more of these types of services. I don't know if they'll be services that people are going to pay for, but we'll see. I do think there are going to be things that people are incented to do. In ADT news, ADT has decided not only are they going to secure your home, they're going to secure you. They have signed a deal with Uber, and they're going to offer in-app safety for riders and drivers. And this is going to be, if you go through the Uber app, it can contact an ADT agent to monitor the trip and stay in touch with you. So instead of calling your friend, you're going to call ADT. That way, ADT is like looking over your shoulder while you're in this dodgy situation, if you feel dodgy. It's called Safe by ADT. It's going to be fully integrated in the Uber app. And I feel like it's got to cost money, but I don't see that.
I'm sure it does, but what was interesting to me, it works both ways. Uber drivers actually can use it as well in case there's a customer or passenger that's threatening.
Yeah. I feel like that has to cost money. Maybe Uber pays it. I don't know. But yeah, I'm like, I would have that on all the time, personally.
Could be part of your ADT package from home.
Oh, that's true. Yeah, and we've seen like ADT does have I feel like they have a button that you can now press and it will share data too. Like, so if I'm walking around at night, I can.
Yeah, key fob. I think we talked about it once before.
Yeah, so this is all part of that. And, ADT is really trying to emphasize this. The world is a scary place. If you give us all the information about you, we will watch you get mugged.
This is why I don't leave the house, but all right.
So there you go. And final bit of news, Telit, who you guys may remember, they're a connectivity provider for IoT. They do modules for LoRa and NB-IoT. They have acquired a company called MobiLogix. And this is going to MobiLogix is a small company that does custom IoT products for healthcare, micromobility, telematics, very similar to Telit. It's just a smaller company. They're basically going to add this services layer on top of the Telit modules. Telit also has been going hard into this business. In July, they did an agreement with Telus, that is the French company, not the Canadian telecom provider.
Thales, yes.
You might pronounce it as Thales.
Thales.
They did a deal with Telus that would combine Telit with Telus's cellular IoT products. So that means that Telus had some NB-IoT, they had some LTE-M products, and they created a new company called Telit Centurion, which will basically offer connectivity solutions for the IoT. That is that deal, and now they're adding that MobiLogix extra customization services layer on top of that. So this is basically creating a connectivity powerhouse for IoT. That's what we're going to call it. I shouldn't say powerhouse. That feels markety. But yeah, that's what this is. Okay, that concludes this section of the show. But now it's time for the Internet of Things podcast hotline, the segment of the show where we talk to you. It's where you can give us a call and we'll answer your questions, and you'll also be entered to win. And we don't have a prize yet for our September drawing, but I have a suspicion of what it's going to be because our sponsor is, again, Silicon Labs and their Works With event, which is going to be held September 13th and 15th. And it is the place to go for all of your IoT, smart home, product device development needs. You're going to be hearing keynotes from industry experts. There's going to be panel discussions, including one led by me, all about Matter. And you can learn more about this free and virtual event at workswith.scilabs.com. Go, go, go. Okay. Anyway, as I was saying, we don't know yet what our prize is going to be for September. And by the time you hear this, it'll be too late, but we still have a few hours left for picking our winner for August. So we're not going to pick our winner until next week. It's a weird time.
It is a weird time. This has never happened before.
It's totally happened before. We probably just weren't as awkward about it.
It could be.
I feel less smooth. Anyway, so someone, as of the time you've heard this, has won the Philips Hue Sync Box Kit. Yay! And it's a pretty exciting prize. I'm not going to lie. And
I like it.
Yeah. All right. So if you want to be entered to win the mystery prize for September, or you just have a burning question you want us to answer, give us a call at 512-623-7424, and you will be entered to win the mystery prize for September. And now let's hear this week's question. It's from Tim from the Chicago area. Let's hear it.
Hi, this is Tim from Chicago area. Love your show. I have a question about Philips Hue and how to use them if the network is unavailable. I have a large number of Hue devices, so large that I'm up to 2 bridges. And what I discovered over the weekend while redoing my network setup, because I'm converting from Orbi to Ubiquity gear, is that if the lights are on and I disable my network gear, unplug my bridge, I don't know how to turn my lights off. If you have any suggestions about that, or if I'm missing something, I'd love to hear it. Thanks so much.
All right. So this is actually good timing because one of the solutions is something Stacy just literally got this morning. But before we get into that, the way the Hue system works with your bridges, you're right. You can't connect to the bridges using your phone, for example, when your internet's out because you've got no Wi-Fi, etc. But the bridges use Zigbee, as do the bulbs. So if your phone had a Zigbee radio, you could still control them when you had no Wi-Fi. But you could add a Zigbee button, a Zigbee switch, or what Stacy just got today, and control things when you don't have internet connectivity.
Yeah, I have a wide variety of Philips Hue switches and buttons. I just bought the tap dial switch. I'll tell you all about it next week because it literally just, I haven't tried it. And what if it's terrible? This one I bought for $49.95, and it is pretty cool because it allows me to tap, and I have lots of Hue tapping things, but this one adds the dial so I can dim it up and down, which is kind of fun. So I will be playing with that. It's rather large, but we'll hear more about it next week. But if you have a lot of Hue stuff, I really recommend getting some of these buttons or switches that allow you to physically control it for times when you don't want to tell Madam A or Google or HomeKit to turn it on or off. I also use them. I have them scattered around. Like there's one on my coffee table. There's one on my bedside table lamp. There's one on my husband's bedside table lamp. I buy a lot of buttons. So get cracking on the button front if that's your jam, and that will solve your problem because they still work when there's no connectivity.
Yep.
All right. That was an easy one. Thanks, Tim. If you want to give us a harder question or an easy question, we're not judging. We like easy questions. Give us a call at 512-623-7424. That concludes this segment of the show, but please stay tuned for our guest, who is Winston Mock, the CEO and founder of Whoosh. It is a connected air filter company, and before y'all roll your eyes, they've really done a lot of work here on the sustainability front, and they launched the product through Kickstarter. So I really wanted to ask him, is Kickstarter still worth doing for a connected product company in 2022? Stay tuned for his answer. But first, let's hear from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Infineon. Hey everyone, we are taking a quick break from the Internet of Things podcast for a message from our sponsor. This week's sponsor is Infineon, and I have Bernard Berg, who is the Director of AI and Data Science at Infineon's Silicon Valley Innovation Center here with me. All right, so you have a history working on big data and deploying large ML AI models, but now you're working on smaller kilobyte-style ML AI models. I would love to know, is it simpler or more complex to build ML for IoT?
Well, big data infrastructures are such more mature, almost standardized, and you allows you to pull data effortlessly, visualize them to build models. So a data scientist can focus on building and improving models, and later can nearly use an infinite amount of resources to execute it. So that's kind of easy. In comparison, the IoT environment is much more constrained. We have less memory, we have constraints on data, we have less processing power and less database access. And then in addition, we have constraints such as energy consumption, limited sensory input, and limited communication bandwidth. And this forces, in addition, to choose an architecture upfront if we run on GPU, CPU, FGPA, and accelerators. Data scientists need to craft their environment, often need to bridge the gap with the hardware and to create cycles of model, quantize, compress, factorize, until models fit into their constraints. It's rather tedious. Deployment of such models is yet another hurdle to overcome in real-life IoT.
So, could big data models be automatically compiled into IoT ones?
Well, today it's wishful thinking. The IoT environment needs to mature more. Eventually, we'll get there by using reinforcement learning that allows to cut unused parts of the model, simplify them, and split them in smaller models that are suited to run on the edge.
And how do you see the world of AI evolving?
At Infineon, we bring intelligence to both sensors and actuators. For sensors, we work on reliability, correction of bias, and drift things, those kind of things. Similarly, for actuators, we protect them against overheating, aging, and in certain cases, actually, we de-age them and provide them a new lifeline. So altogether, these smart new sensors will be easier to use. So we work on speeding up or even automating calibration and tuning, making IoT deployment easier and faster.
Where can I learn more about Infineon and its efforts in TinyML?
For more information, visit infineon.com.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Internet of Things podcast. This is your host, Stacey Higginbotham, and today's guest is Winston Mock, who is the CEO and founder of Whoosh. Hello, Winston. How are you today?
I'm doing well. It's great to be here, Stacey.
I am really happy to have you here because you are solving one of the problems that a lot of companies have tried to solve, but you're solving it in a really unique, and I'm going to go with sustainable way. So Whoosh is a smart air filter, and I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about why you went with the smart air filter route and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, this is a business I started a couple of years back because of the wildfires in California. I'm originally from Canada and Toronto. And so it'd be the first time I'd ever experienced, bad air quality that I couldn't escape. So just learning how to make an air filter from YouTube videos, you put one of those HVAC filters with a box fan, and it'd be a very cost-effective way to do it. Lo and behold, that air filter was something that we've all kind of grown up and seen in homes with furnaces or return air grills in your house. And it's something that when I grew up, my dad used to replace it, but I always knew about it. So it became something that I learned about as a homeowner. But it hasn't really changed since my dad's era. So I thought about setting on a goal to see if we could innovate it. And one of the biggest challenges I think we could solve that relates to that sustainability was just making it easier to ship. Shipping was a big issue, mainly because filters are kind of that, it's like a large picture frame. So I had to come in boxes that typically exceeded one of the kind of small package dimensions. So if you're shipping a strange large box, and there's no way you can kind of break it down into something smaller. So if you buy a single filter online, you'd be paying about $12 or $16 just to ship it, which costs more than the filter itself. So if we could find a way to fold it up into something maybe a quarter the size, it would ship for a lot cheaper. And that was one of my first challenges because, going down that path, we'd find ways to make it more sustainable as well. So Whoosh was built on the premise of making it easier to ship by having a reusable frame that you buy once and a disposable insert. So you can have that same high quality filtration, but it ships for a lot less because that insert folds into a quarter of the size. The thing I really like about this is that reusable frame. You buy that once and it's an investment. So we can give you a better quality filter. And where we're going, obviously, for some of the interests of connected devices, that reusable frame is a great area where we can invest in electronics to make it smart. And this is where I went down that path as well. So although the beginning was around shippability, improved sustainability, I think the real benefits started to shine when we could actually embed some electronics and start answering those really tough questions, which anyone would ask when they replace their filter, which is when do I need to change it? Is it really that dirty? They often have a one size fits all rule: change it every 3 months. Sometimes they say change it every 3 to 6 months, but these type of questions are really difficult for a homeowner to answer depending on your habits and where you live, seasonality. All of these play a role. And most importantly, if you ask anybody, do you want your filter to be working? Do you know if it's working? Those are the kind of questions we want to make very easy to answer and as simple as a kind of a red light, green light. And with it being a connected solution, we can also automate that process of delivering the replacement when it's time to change. So we can even remove the question of when is it, and just ship it to you saying, oh, now it's time to change.
Yeah. And I feel like we've seen some innovation in this area around the smart home. So we've seen smart thermostats. My Ecobee actually is like, hey, you've run your air conditioning for X number of hours. It's time to change your filter. And we've also seen like 3M actually sells a connected Filtrete filter that has a Bluetooth thing that you can connect to your phone. And it's like, but none of those, like the innovation around the frame, I think is really nice. in the sense that you get better quality electronics, you're not throwing them away all the time. And then that ties into this idea of kind of a whole home smart air quality system. So talk to me about how you're visualizing in an ideal world how your filters might work with other devices in the home.
Yeah, and that's a big point about particularly connected devices. So as you mentioned, we've got smart thermostats, and there are filters that have a certain level of smartness. And these are great steps as we see a lot of smart home adoption. Our solution really kind of takes it one step further. As you mentioned, we can invest in better quality sensors, right? That you don't throw away. And that allows us to do better quality measurements. So we can actually see like how much of the airflow is impacted, which is a kind of a key parameter of whether a filter is working or not. That information then can go back into the existing systems. So smart thermostats today, instead of having to use a timer or runtime, can ingest that information that we provide. So our intent with this smart hardware is that that information will be available. So I think like the Matter protocol is a great example where cross-platform data access will be available. And so we want to proliferate that information because when you really think about it, the filter is one element of a larger system, but it has some of the real data that's actually reflective of the airflow, heating and cooling, humidity parameters in your HVAC system. So that big HVAC system is doing all this work, and we're integrated deeply into it. And we can feed that data back up into these larger ecosystems for better analytics. Because if you think about it, it's right at the intersection, the HVAC, at health, comfort, and energy.
So let's talk about Kickstarter, because you launched this back in April, and it was mildly surprising to me because, I've been doing this a long time, and I remember the Kickstarter era of 2012 through 2014, when we saw all sorts of cool projects come on Kickstarter that were connected and smart, and a lot of them died. Not all of them, but many of them died. What was your rationale for going through a crowdfunding?
Yeah, that's a great question. There's definitely an element there that you mentioned. I had witnessed a lot of companies come through Kickstarter, and we obviously are launching maybe about 8 or 9 years later than many of the ones you mentioned in that era. So it's been a lot of maturity since then. When I looked at Kickstarter, and this is a question a lot of our advisors had asked as well, you could either go out stealthy, right? Just very targeted with ads, or you could go with Kickstarter. So that would more so allow you to get out early and really kind of get the message out there. And there would be different benefits to each channel. When I thought about it, there was one thing to go out stealthy, where you would just buy ad traffic and see the conversion and then slowly roll your product out there and find your target audience. For me, when I thought about it, I thought our product was something that needed a bit of a splash. And I say that because, and this, I think it varies depending on what product you are, we were trying to innovate on a space that classically, I think most people would consider unsexy in some ways, right? It's something that's out of sight, out of mind. You store it away. And so I thought, well, heck, why not be the first to try to make it something that people would think is like, oh, that's kind of cool. And it was really interesting going down the Kickstarter route, because one real big benefit is it allows you to drive pre-sales and get that information from your audience without necessarily having the product fully baked. So we'd run a beta test for about a year even before we launched on Kickstarter to kind of iron out most of the bugs, understand kind of the initial customer feedback and figure it out. But Kickstarter just still allowed us to have a moment in time where we would make a splash. And I think that was probably the biggest difference, because once we launched, the amount of industry outreach that we had from large companies that had been watching the space, and in some cases with products that are very similar, which we'd have to figure out how it fits in with that. It really allowed us to get that splash and kind of some PR coverage. The other route, again, going stealthy, although it may be much more calculated, didn't have the splash element. It did allow us to go out early, but it really couldn't align all of these opportunities into something bigger. I think that, for us, that was really the big point as to why we went down Kickstarter, and it worked out. We got the coverage, and we've got some great partnerships coming that I'm really excited about.
Yeah. Did Emerson come through the Kickstarter, or was that prior?
Yes, they backed us. I can say there are quite a number of others that have done the same. And again, it might be the fact that the space we're in is very established. Air filters, many people don't think about it, but this is a multi-billion-dollar business that you just can't run away from because you have to change your filters.
Right. I was like, it's one of those, it's like toilet paper. You're like, you're an adult when you have to buy your own toilet paper. You're an adult when you're having to replace an air filter.
Exactly.
Like,
and I thank you for that. I want you to know I appreciate and thank you for that. You're changing your filter because I'm sure it does you good, but it also is great for me because I think it's a great opportunity for us to build a pretty innovative business.
So when I think back to Kickstarter campaigns, you're right. A lot of good can come up from it. Publicity, meet relevant suppliers, talk to partners in the industry. I think that's all to the good. There's also the potential for, I don't want to call it backlash, but your audience for Kickstarter, the people who back you are going to become some of the most vocal supporters and critics, which can be, they might be leading your product in the wrong direction. And then they also, in this era of like supply chain worries, there's also this worry that you might not be able to meet your goals and needs. So how did you kind of mitigate or think about some of those risks?
Yeah. For the first part around, Kickstarter backers having that duality, right? They could be their biggest supporters and biggest critics. I personally think that's an amazing thing because we had beta testers. We had, over 100 of them before we launched the Kickstarter. So we had some experience. And these critics were interesting because we actually launched our product in the beta test days on the Craig's free list section. So the expectation there was it was free, right? But you'd get the product and you'd give feedback, and many of them converted to paying. So now these were people who expected something free, but we worked with them very closely through that exercise to understand and somewhat win them over, right? To say, what you're providing is valuable. And that was such a critical area. Kickstarter to me was just another extension of that beta test where we would start off with customers who are backing, right? Paying customers, if you may. But I would treat them the same because, at any point we have to, satisfy what it is that they see as our value proposition. But some strategies we've tried to taken to best manage that, again, being the best advocates and biggest critiques is really just listening to them. We try to get product out early. In our case, what we were lucky was the product can be split into two components. One that's just a mechanical filter that has still many benefits. It has the reusable frame and the foldable insert. So they could start testing that in an early stage. So we shipped to actually a large number of our existing backers this early product. And we've actually followed up with interviews with many of them to collect their feedback. So they filled in surveys. We've had 1 hour video interviews asking them the questions, and we continue that process. Now, the one question you brought up about leading us down the wrong path, I think that's always a possibility depending on my side. I'm the lead product manager in this case. So I look at all the feedback, and I think I still have to make the right decisions as to what constitutes maybe an early adopter versus a mass adopter, what will set us up for success. But again, all feedback I think is good. Just to lead into the supply chain issues you mentioned, those are always, I think, those are definitely challenges that we're experiencing more now than before. But by breaking up, for us on Kickstarter, by breaking up the mechanical aspects of the product from the electronics, it's actually allowed us to kind of keep our backers up to date during this process. One thing that's really important for us is actually Kickstarter is just a start, right? It's a kickstart. We're going to be facing supply chain challenges for much bigger volumes as we start scaling the product. And so by doing this Kickstarter also, we learn the ins and outs of what it is to start delivering on what is, I think, low volume, but it immediately allows us to start thinking about how do we scale this, right? And start mitigating against these supply chain or chip shortage issues, which I think is plaguing the entire industry.
On that supply chain note, do you have advice for people?
Yeah, it's definitely we're in trying times when it comes to getting particularly electronic components. My only advice really is front loading kind of design compatibility so that you can adopt a variety of chips as they may. Like before, I think there was a lot of optimization down one path where you'd finalize your design and you would just try to procure those parts. But now I think we're challenged in a world where you don't know if you can get A, so you have to go with B. So right off the get-go, you have to start thinking about that early. There are some benefits to that as well, because it allows you to be able to choose this or that. And there's probably differences between the two in terms of what they offer as benefits. I'll give you an example. There may be certain chips that offer a subset of features that might be beneficial that you might not utilize, but the other set has a different set of features. And so although this, unfortunately does put more weight in your research and development bucket, I think in the long term, it pays its dividends because this immunity allows you to navigate this and evaluate other aspects that you may not have considered.
Like you could add new features or?
It could be. Like we're looking at a chipset now for Wi-Fi connectivity that the alternative has a more persistent connectivity, but a different power consumption profile. And so, if you fully optimize the power, you'd stick with the one chip, but it wouldn't connect to Wi-Fi persistently. By supporting the other one, you get some added benefit. And, you may or may not use it, but having that availability, if you have to do a dual design, you might as well explore at the same time. And again, you're just trying to find, I think, the silver lining in why you're doing this. But at the end of the day, there is a silver lining. And for us, I think there's probably future benefit because we potentially have a better solution now that we've been forced down this path where we would not have looked at it if we didn't have this supply chain issue.
That's true. All right. So then the big question, like the $64,000 question here is, if I am trying to build a hardware-based connected product, should I turn to Kickstarter?
I think it depends on your product because I think there's a lot of variety now in what we consider kind of connected. Our solution has got some, in some ways, I believe, heavier tech, where you're going from a traditional cardboard filter that didn't even have any glimpse of electronics for the most part, to something that's fully connected, real time, sensory, integrates with your smart thermostat, right? Has an air quality sensor component that can feedback. It's a full loop system. So I think for products that have more depth and a story to tell that you need to communicate, Kickstarter is a great platform to kind of establish that. That said, I still think there's a lot of heavy lifting to do when you've got that because a lot of people may not have time to listen to this whole thing. But again, it's a starting point that you can use to refine and improve, right, your messaging as you move to your own website, as you drive towards getting more publicity. So Kickstarter, at the end of the day, can also be just a great forcing function that really pushes you out there because it allows your company to focus on activity. Again, the reverse of that is if you don't do a Kickstarter, you'd be reliant potentially on, trying to get traffic through ads. And I think, then again, if you have a very simple product that ads can convey that message and drive traffic, I think, yeah, you can iterate. And this could be even for connected products, if it's a bit of a Me Too play.
Okay. So is it still like, we just wrote about how we're bored with yet another smart home product. There's nothing new under the sun, another connected light bulb, another sensor. We're all kind of like, Is there still room for innovation in the smart home? And do you recommend people think about that and try to build a hardware product for the smart home?
We're definitely, I'm obviously a big supporter in a sense that, the filter, which is in every home, had not gone through significant innovation. It definitely, there are others in the space, but, we still managed to find a way to navigate this sea. I think there continues to be a lot of opportunity in smart home. It's maturing to a point now where, that question you brought around integration and passing data, we've got a lot of work to do there as well. As you mentioned, you really want that convenience factor. So these machines may now currently telling you, I don't know, run that extra cycle or this or that. But that means there's still opportunity to further improve, which I firmly believe there still remains a lot of capability. Now, I think there's still a lot of work on standards, right? Like Matter is a great example about cross-compatibility. So a lot of the wars that have been fought over just trying to maintain your ecosystem, once those barriers come down, I think the promise of a smart home comes to life more because consumers today are pigeonholed down certain ecosystems which limit the ability. So I think maybe that we must pass over that hurdle before we really get to this fruition of the true smart home. But I think it's endless how much automation, that world they depict in these future worlds where you come home and all the blinds open, things turn on and all that. We still market it as if this, then that, right? So I feel like we're still using very technical jargon too.
Yeah, I mean, 2 or 3 days a week that actually happens in my house, and then it breaks and I don't want to fix it. So yeah, okay. Winston, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. I really appreciate it.
Oh no, it's been fantastic.
And that concludes this week's episode of the Internet of Things podcast. Please join us next Thursday and don't forget to subscribe. And if you can't get enough IoT news, I would love for you to sign up at www.stacyoniot.com for our weekly IoT newsletter, where we explain all kinds of things that we don't even get to on the show. Once again, thank you for listening and please subscribe.